Are you all set? Okay. I'd like to call to order the 5 p.m. Tuesday, April 16th, 2024 City Council Special Budget Work Session Meeting. Could we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Altman.
Here.
Councilmember Meadows.
Here.
Councilmember Watson. Mayor Pro Tem Singh. Mayor Brookover.
Here. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, motion to approve the agenda and to excuse Councilmember Watson, who is out of town.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Communication from the audience. Anybody in the audience wants to talk to us tonight? Seeing none. Anybody in the queue?
There are no callers in the queue.
Okay. Communication from council members. Any council members want to talk to us tonight? Mr. Meadows has already taken the podium, so I assume that means something. I don't know. And he's facing the wrong direction with the podium. It's just like the legislature, but anyway. So. Dr. Altman?
Yes, just very briefly. This is a remarkable document, and not just for its contents, but for the very, very high production values. And everything about the city and how it runs is in here if you know where to look and how to look. So congratulations and thank you to everybody who produced this very high quality document.
Anything else from council members? Okay, communication from city manager?
I have none at this time.
Okay, discussion item 6.1, discussion of fiscal year 2025 preliminary budget and fee schedule, April 16th, 2024 work session. Includes emphasis on specific divisions. The record should now show that the Mayor Pro Tem has joined us. Mr. Bellarmine.
Yes, just an opening comment is the proposed fiscal year 2025 city budget is the city's financial plan, a roadmap per se, how we intend to invest the public resources received to support programs, projects, services, and services between July 1 of 2024 and June 30th, 2025. Tonight we're going to provide an overview of the proposed 2025 city budget and some other deeper details. So I'll turn it over to Audrey Kincaid, Deputy Finance Director, to start.
I just want to say, kind of repeat your comments, is that this is a heavy lift to prepare this document, and it's not just a finance document, it's a citywide document. So I want to thank finance staff, all of the directors and their staff that helped put this document together. We can go on to the next slide. So this is the summarized look at the entire budget document with all funds presented with a comparison to the prior fiscal year. Obviously, we have several divisions and funds being discussed tonight and next week, but after you've had a chance to look at the document, are there any other funds or divisions that struck your interest that we would like to have more detail or discussion on?
Nothing.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I'll certainly do my best to answer any questions tonight that you have or during these work sessions. As always, we have directors available to answer questions about their specific divisions and their departments. And if there's anything we can't answer immediately, we'll definitely take them back for follow-up and prepare our Q&A document and share that after each budget work session. Next slide. So this will look very similar to what was presented during the forecast. This is a highlight of all the position changes. Obviously, we only looked at the general fund during that forecast, so this also includes a couple of the other funds that had position changes. This is a very condensed version of that personnel summary. And I just want to remind you that the personnel summary looks at full-time and part-time positions as headcount, and then contingent based on their hours that were budgeted. The only major change from the forecast for the general fund is that DPW removed a financial analyst position from those forecast presentation to the budget request document.
Can I ask a question now,
Sure.
or should I wait?
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
So for the departments that want to add positions, are those departments fully hired for the current FTEs?
Depends on the department, but there are vacancies certainly, and any of these I wouldn't say all of the additions are vacant, but it kind of depends on the department. I would say like police isn't fully staffed, but they're also asking for additional positions. I think fire is fully staffed and they're asking for additional positions, so it kind of varies based on the department.
Okay, I know this is something that's been robustly talked about in the public discourse, so I know our city manager has provided personnel reports in his weekly reports, but I don't know if you have anything to add in terms of if we're on target for hiring.
We're making significant headway in hiring those that are most challenging. Law enforcement, engineers continue to provide, some difficulty in achieving the goal, but we continue to look at our staffing and we'll continue to strive to fill those positions, not only in the remainder of '24, but if approved into the '25 period budget.
If I could just ask Audrey, maybe you don't have the budget book that we were given in front of you, but this slide would reflect pages 51 through 61 of that document, which details where the vacancies are and any additional positions that would be hired.
Correct. So that has an actual as of fiscal year 23, so as of June of that year, because you have to pick a moment in time. So obviously we filled positions during 24, so this doesn't necessarily reflect where we're at today.
Got it.
Do we have these slides either online or in our packets?
They're in your
Yes.
packet.
They're in.
Online packet.
Not in the book, on the online.
Okay.
It's like the second or third attachment down, I believe.
Thank you.
And I'll move on to general fund unless there are other non-general fund questions. Okay, next slide. So this is just a snapshot of the general fund, that kind of summary page in your budget book. So obviously we did a lot of discussion about the general fund during the forecast, so I'm not going to necessarily repeat all of that conversation. Obviously we did a little bit more refining of positions and operations, so I want to touch on what has significantly changed from that conversation. So for fiscal year 24, our current fiscal year, the change was reducing the addition to fund balance by approximately $560,000. And that's comprised of increasing some revenue and increasing some expenses. So the changes in revenue are coming from an additional transfer in from the Parks Capital Improvement Fund of $200,000. The general fund had previously transferred some funds to help with timing issues of grants, but as those have closed out, they're able to return those funds. We knew that they were going to be able to return the $405,000 that was sent last year, but they decided they were also able to send back the $200,000 that was sent in several years ago. So they'll be able to return those funds. An additional transfer in of $188,000 will come from the income tax, just based on the revised estimates as we were pulling the numbers together. So increased revenue obviously trickles down to all those transfers into the general fund. So the increases to expenditures, that includes a $345,000 transfer to CIP and $80,000 transfer to the library to support projects that were previously anticipated to be funded by ARPA. And then an additional $200,000 transfer is needed to go to the insurance fund. That's related to some timing issues of settlements of lawsuits where we're trying to recover funds from our insurance carriers, but there's probably some timing differences between when we had to pay those funds out and when we'll receive the reimbursement from the carrier. And the intention would always be to return those funds to the general fund once we've recovered from the insurance company.
A question, the transfer from the income tax to the general fund, is that in intergovernmental revenue?
No, it would be in other financing sources.
Other financing sources, okay.
Yeah, that's kind of a combination of a couple different things. It would be transfers in and reappropriate equity.
Okay, thank you.
And so then the major changes in '25, we're expecting an additional use of fund balance of $3.9 million from the forecast. So there's some small increases in revenue, mostly in intergovernmental revenue. We've beefed up the state revenue sharing based on current estimates. There's some ARPA revenue, federal grant carryover to '25, and then the CDBG sidewalk grants were expanded a little bit from original forecast. So the main changes are in the expenditure side of an increase about $4.8 million. So in operating costs includes $500,000 of an equipment rental charge for fire to support the purchase of a fire truck early. We send these rental charges to the garage fund to support the purchase over, the life of an asset, but the asset is not going to make it to its estimated useful life, so we need funds earlier than expected. So to help purchase that fund sooner than they would have. Capital outlays increasing $1.1 million. That's partially the expanded sidewalk work for hazardous sidewalk, CDBG, and then the Red Cedar Community Egress Pathway, and I'll let Scott explain what that means. And then drain outfalls, the design, permit, and improvement to the drain outfalls. Transfers are an increase of $2.8 million. So 2.6 of that is going to the CIP fund to, again, support projects that were originally anticipated to be funded by ARPA, and then other emergent needs that came up during the budget development process. $500,000 is going to local streets to support the Trowbridge Signal Project, and then that's offset by a savings of approximately $288,000 from the forecast that was originally anticipated to be an additional subsidy for the Parks and Rec Fund, but based on our conversations and working through the budget process, we were able to reduce that subsidy and just get back to the standard operational transfer with a CPI increase. So then on the next slide, we can see how that impacts fund balance. So the '24 fund balance, we're anticipating a surplus of $9.4 million, and that's comprised of two major components. The ARPA savings of $5.8 million, because that's funding existing public safety wages, and then a savings of $3.5 million operation surplus just from general operations, mostly I would say related to personnel vacancies and that supplemental pension payment that we've talked about. So that sort of carries forward into fiscal year '25, where we're going to have an operating deficit within the proposed budget document. Of that is $3.5 million of these one-time capital needs. So most of those are shown as those transfers or that $500,000 garage rental charge, and then that's in addition to a $1.1 million just general operations deficit. So that's obviously not something that's sustainable year over year, but based on the way that the unassigned fund balance is tracking, we would still be in a comfortable position. So the council policy is 10 to 20% of unrestricted revenue. So that would include that assigned revenue for the ARPA. So we would be well over 25% if we included that. If we kind of excluded that from the conversation, we would be at about 13.6% of fund balance as a percent of operating. So still within that kind of 10 to 20 if we're just even talking about unassigned fund balance.
So I have a question about the $1.1 million general operations deficit. And is that in part because we were understaffed previously? And so now with respect to that, it looks like we're spending more money because we're hiring more people?
I would say that wages are a major factor in that. I would have to look more specifically at what division is causing that major change. But I would say, we've added a lot of positions, and that is probably the major change, major swing in the general fund.
I guess what I'm after is, do we have to worry about this recurring again next year?
It's a possibility. I think there's got to be a conversation about what is appropriate staffing, what can we hire, what positions can we fill.
Okay. And so the deficit is just expenditures in excess of revenues
Correct,
for the year?
correct.
All right, thank you.
Any other general fund questions before I move on to income tax? Okay, next slide. So again, this is the snapshot for the income tax fund. So there's a couple of things that I just want to talk through. So 24, we're expecting to do better than our amended budget to the tune of approximately $16 million. And that's mostly due to doing a review and collection efforts for state tapes for 2 prior calendar years. So we've done collection efforts on the 2020 and 2021 tax returns. So we get information from the state about residents, and we reach out if they have not filed tax returns. So we have certainly caught people up. So we've seen a lot of revenue, not just from those specific years, but they've caught themselves all the way up. And then we also charge penalties and interest. Penalties, we have some discretion on charging, but interest, we charge based on whatever the state mandate is. So that's where the 16 million is coming from for fiscal year 24, expecting to do better than budget, but then a slight decrease into fiscal year 25 because we're only expecting to do 1 year's worth of state tape review for fiscal or calendar year 22. And obviously, as we get people in compliance, that hopefully some of those additional state tape things will taper off or be smaller in future years as people are caught up. But obviously, there's new people always moving into the city or working in the city. And I will take a moment to plug, if you live or work in East Lansing, please file your East Lansing tax return. These are due by April 30th for calendar year 2023.
If I could ask a question on that, what was the percentage of folks that did not file in 2020 and then the percentage of 2021 that did not file?
I will have to follow up with that.
Okay. Thank you. And I think folks have heard me, I know the city manager has, in terms of, understanding what we're leaving on the table without having an electronic filing system and what the state treasury department could help us with.
Mm-hmm. And I also want to say, if you're a home preparer and you think that you've filed electronically, you may not have. If you've worked with a company, they may have been able to electronically file for you, but home tax preparers, like TurboTax, they will not file your tax return. So you need to make sure that you bring it to the city or you mail those in. All right.
Just briefly describe the 3 categories of expenditures and, well, operating costs, I understand. That's what we spend on actually transfers out is to the general fund, right?
Yeah, and I can show you that in more detail on the next slide.
Great.
And then it might cover some of the personnel services conversation as well. So if we go to the next slide, yep. So this is kind of the flow of that income tax revenue. So we start with our gross income tax revenue, less any refunds that we need to owe. Then the first thing that comes out of there is we reimburse the general fund for any lost property taxes with that 5 mil reduction. So the general fund is made whole for property taxes first and foremost. Then the next thing that comes out are administrative costs. So that includes the income tax administrators' salary and benefits, as well as a share of a couple other finance staff that are allocated. And then the main other costs are the third-party processor for administrative services.
Which is how much?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but I can. So then from there, that's what we need to allocate as our net revenue. So we have our 60% or pension. So that pension number is also combined with the administrator's cost in that personnel services line on the previous slide. So that's why that's such a large number, that $5 million is including this supplemental pension payment. So as we talked about, that the previous goal has been to contribute about $5 million in supplemental pension payments to MERS. You can see that we're not quite at $5 million based on the numbers that are in the 25 budget, but if you look at the past couple of years, we've averaged over $5 million for those past 5 years. If we want to continue that $5 million and the general fund needs to contribute, just know that that would increase that $1.1 million use of fund balance. So that's certainly a conversation we can have. So then the 20% of public safety, for public safety is split equally between police and fire, and those are transfers to the general fund. And then 20% infrastructure are transfers to local street, and that makes up about 60% of that 20%, and then 40% to the CIP funds. So those are transfers, all transfers out to those funds. Any other questions on income tax?
Just I guess, a confirmation that the net income tax that's available for the 2020-60 split is reduced by an amount equal to the difference between 13 mills and 17.5, I think, that we had at the time that we adopted the income taxes. Are those figures correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So about 4.5 mils is peeled out, is that right?
It's the full 5 mil potential reduction.
Yeah, so it's like 12.5
Yeah, sorry.
versus the 17.5.
Although the charter mentions the 13 mills, so there should be another 5 mills that comes into the income tax. It's the amount that lawfully could have been assessed.
Yes.
So we have to use the 13 mills, I think. So.
But the net, after making up for the property tax loss, the net is $8 million.
Is what?
The net is $8 million.
8.1 million.
I'm just checking on the math.
Yeah, so we'll go back and talk about,
I just want to make sure that
Yes.
we're doing it that way.
All right. So that is all I have. I believe the next is fire, unless you have other questions before we move on. Oh, great.
so Chief Carson's going to present the fire budget.
Before we go any further, could you preview for us the presenters tonight and the order of events? So I'm not seeing that in the agenda.
So in the PowerPoint, Chief Carson is after the overview, and then I know Heather and I don't know if Matt Apostle will be doing the CDBG budget after Chief Carson. And then I scroll down and then parking, which Caleb will do, and Jennifer.
And that's it for tonight?
That's it for tonight.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council members. The first part I will go over is the revenues for the fire department, and I will describe a little bit what's in each category, but if you have questions, feel free to ask. The intergovernmental revenues are the Public Act 289 money. The charges for services include the EMS transport, MSU fire contract, which is what MSU pays the fire department for coverage of their facilities. MSU events are what the athletic events that we cover and all other activities on campus, and hazmat. The other includes the income tax. Is there questions in regards to revenues?
I have one question, which is concerning the 289 revenue that is projected to be $586,000, I believe, less than last year.
About 583, 890.
Yes, 583,890.
Yes.
Numbers on page 48. And I think we had talked about trying to avoid leaving money on the table from PA 289 by making additional pension contributions. And I had a conversation with the city manager about that earlier. I just wanted to make a placeholder that I think if we're amenable to making additional pension contributions through the fire department, then we could recoup at least some of that money from the state. And I think that's a good return on that money. And that may require a budget amendment if we
Yeah,
decide to do
so
that.
if I may, I can
Yeah.
bring what that ratio will be, because the state's reimbursement, I believe, is only 28% of actual expenditures in the fire department. So to get back that 589, we would have to identify what additional use of fund balance in the general fund would be needed to dedicate to pre-funding the fire department's pension.
And I don't think the number needs to be 589. I think it needs to be whatever makes sense. I'm just interested in trying to leverage 289 funding while it's available.
Sure.
That's my main goal. And
We'll give you some options, and then you can.
That
as-
sounds great. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, I will go on to the expenditures. The personnel services, obviously, is the majority of our ask. We are asking for 3 new employees. We are fully staffed at this time, but 3 new employees would allow us to place a 3rd medic in service. It would reduce the amount of mutual aid that we were requesting, and it would allow an additional person on the fire ground. Our call volume has increased at about 900 in the last 4 years. So our people are running long and hard, and the job's getting a little more difficult as far as the computer work, so the 3rd person would definitely assist us.
And you have the equipment.
We do.
Okay.
Some highlights in regards to the end of this fiscal year. Our safety training officer worked with District 1, which is an emergency mitigation group. We have obtained 4 ventilation machines. We will be putting these on our frontline ambulances. One of our facilities in the area has a lot of vent patients, and usually it requires us to remove a person from our fire truck, putting that out of service, and physically bagging a person on the way to the hospital. That's not what they're used to. We worked with District 1. They donated 4 ventilators and 2 batteries to us at a cost of about $83,000, and are going to help do the upkeep for them for the next several years. We will be the first fire department in the area that will be using this. This year, we leveraged $11,000 from Lansing Community College in bartering SCBA and harnesses in lieu of education from Lansing Community College. We were allowed to put 18 people through live fire training, which is a big deal because we're not allowed to burn houses in this area, and they're very hard to find anyways. And we have provided 4 people driver's training education. Also, District 1 provided 3 members of our department to attend a 2-day mental health training seminar in Traverse City. They covered our travel, lodging, and class fees for about $1,500. Are there questions in regards to our expenditures before I go on?
I don't see any.
Okay, the last thing I want to review is our ask for some fee schedule changes. We have a private ambulance turnover fee that we want to introduce at $800. These charges, all of that I review, if you do not call us, we do not charge, but these facilities should be contracting with privates, and many of them do, and the privates aren't upholding their end of the contract, and that is using our services for non-emergencies, which takes away from the citizens using the services as it's called for. The second one is interfacility transports. This would be in regards to the Sparrow standalone on Jolly Road. It is in Okemos, but we are not mutual aid to Okemos, so that would be a fee to them if we had to transport from hospital to hospital. Interfacility transports, these are non-emergency transfers that are within our health facilities. These are the PEG tubes, these are doctor follow-ups, feeding tubes, lab work. These are non-emergents. These are things that are usually scheduled for privates. And again, if the privates aren't able to keep up their end of the work, or we are working with facilities to try to encourage and give them providers that would be able to fulfill that service. Medical facility lift assist at $400. This is just a deterrent not to utilize our people for their staffing problems. This has been very minimal lately. In the past, we have seen a little bit higher, but this is being proactive. Our mileage loaded per patient went up to $17 a mile, and that is on the low end as advocated by AccuMed. And the last one is an EMS intercept that would affect Bath and DeWitt Township Fire Departments to charge them $350 per call. They align with a private service, and when their private services can't fulfill them, we are going into their area. They are not a mutual aid partner, so we are doing one-way service for them. And those are service fees we'd like to introduce. And I can entertain any questions.
I do have some questions for you.
Yes, sir.
And they may be directed jointly at the city manager. So I'm looking at your fiscal year 2024 amended budget as compared to the fiscal year 2025 budget request. And I see that the amended budget amount was, for want of better calculation, $3.7 million. And the 2025 budget request, for revenues. And the revenues are projected to be down about $600,000. And that's intergovernmental revenue. Can you I just want to step back from your list of things, and if either of you could explain why that intergovernmental revenue then is projected to go down this year, and you may have already done it and I lost it. But
When I'm looking at my budget worksheet, it says the PA 289 money went from $3,760,35 to $3,147,275.
all right, and the reason for that is?
That's the indication that Councilmember Altman and I were just talking about, is they only reimburse 28% of actual costs, and we've reduced any general fund additional payments for pension. And so we're looking at whether or not we want to increase our pension costs in the fire department to bring some of that PA 289 dollars back to the city.
And then going through the revenue, continue with the revenue, your amended budget for 2024 said almost $1.9 million, and you're projecting 2.383. Is that reflective only of the additional charges for services that you just mentioned, or is there something else in there that I'm not getting?
It's primarily the ambulance service fees.
And that's a projection with an increase,
Yes,
or with current fees?
with current right now, but what we did is we changed our, from AccuMed to medical, or from medical management to AccuMed, and we're seeing better returns. We have-
This is the contract we did
Yes, sir.
last year.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. And then going to your expenditures, you have a amended budget amount of 9.82, and your request is for 9.77. I'm a little confused because I thought you were essentially asking for additional personnel, and yet the projection is that the budget request would go down. Can either one of you explain that to me?
I think, again, it's offset by some of those pension costs that were in last year's budget that are not being reflected as an expense in in next year's budget.
Because why?
Because we were funding all of the additional pension, not from the general fund, but from the income tax fund.
Okay. And then your operating costs go from 2.0 to 2.6. Is that the fire engine?
500,000 of it.
Yes.
was.
500,000? Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, I do have just one question about page 107, I think, of the budget
I don't
document.
have that document.
I don't know if you don't have that, that's okay. You talked there about 580,000 that is expected to come from MSU, but it looks to me like this is specifically billed items. There was a point in time when the university was giving us about $1.5 million above any Act 289 money that we received, and then over a period of time, they have reduced that. Am I understanding that they are not providing us any additional money as a grant to provide fire services on campus?
At this time, this is what they're doing. I think it is something we're going to go back and revisit. I think it's an old contract, so I will be working with the city manager and revisiting that and at least trying to make some communications between the two.
All right, well, I encourage that to happen, and, they need to pony up. So thanks for all the service that you do.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
So Matt Apostle is going to present the CDBG Community Development Block Grant Fund budget for fiscal year 2025.
Hi, Council. Thank you, Robert, for the introduction. Today, I will briefly review the fiscal year 2025 proposal for the Community Development Block Grant budget as recommended by the Community Development Advisory Committee. But just let me know if you have any questions along the way. And again, if approved tonight, Council on their consent agenda, Council will hold a public hearing on this budget on May 14th. So this can be kind of a primer for that larger discussion at the public hearing. First off, I want to thank the CD Advisory Committee membership for their work on drafting this budget recommendation. The committee was brought back in 2021, so then this is their third cycle of the budget, of drafting a budget recommendation and reviewing the applications. Bless you. There was an application period from November 1st to December 15th. We received a total of 15 applications, and the CD Advisory Committee had a Q&A session with those applicants, and then ended up coming back together and deliberating and crafting a budget recommendation, which is available for you tonight in your agenda packets, a budget recommendation letter, as well as just a summary slide, which is right up here with a table showing the recommendation. With CDBG, which is funds intended to address the needs of low to moderate income individuals and neighborhoods within the city. There are three categories: CDBG Public Services, which is capped at 15% of our total grant each year. CDBG Planning Administration, which is funds for admin and other things, which is capped at 20% of our annual grant. And then essentially an other category, which we call Public Facilities and Housing, which encompasses our public improvement projects and our housing rehabilitation program, and HOPE, our down payment assistance program. HUD, one other thing to note is that HUD has yet to approve our fiscal year 2025, or HUD has yet to announce our fiscal year 2025 CDBG formula allocations, which means that this is based on the fiscal year 2024 CDBG formula allocation. Hopefully, we will know that number by the public hearing, and we will be able to adjust accordingly. However, the committee has given a recommendation in their letter on kind of if it's an increase, then this, if it's a decrease, then this, to help guide their recommendation post HUD announcement. Generally speaking, the committee recommended to fully fund the public services category at 15% of the total grant, and then fund the administrative costs at the level requested by staff, which is $51,850. And then for the public facilities and housing category, one thing to note in particular that the committee recommended that we mention is for CHP, Capital Area Housing Partnership, for their homeowner rehabilitation program. They are recommended to receive $0 for fiscal year 2025 for that program. However, it's important to note that they currently have $259,916.80 in their pot from previous years to use on homeowner rehabilitation projects. That number is going to be higher in that budget recommendation letter because that was approved by the CD Advisory Committee in February, because there was a rehabilitation project that took place between February 15th when they approved the letter and today. But the number today is $259,916.80 as the total amount available for homeowner rehabilitation projects.
Can I ask a question while
Yep.
we're here? And is that that pot, is that leftover ARPA dollars that they were allocated through this CDBG, additional dollars, or an annual CDBG allocation?
It is made up of their previous grants from previous fiscal years,
Okay, of CDBG.
along with program income from funds because we're giving out a no-interest loan.
Yeah.
So it's partially forgiven. So if somebody sells the house, then we get program income back on the program, which increases their funds partially as well.
And out of curiosity, who works with them within qualifying homes for East Lansing to ensure these funds are being offered?
That would be the community and economic development staff, or the city side of things, and we meet with Capital Area Housing Partnership monthly to discuss project updates on the program. They'll say, hey, we have this address is applying for these funds, and we can kind of go through and make sure that everything makes sense, check eligibility with them, and
The money's
work hand in
there,
hand.
so that's where I'm getting to a
Yes.
little, how can we light a fire somewhere to ensure our
Just
residents
note
are being
that
taken care
There are
of,
three
so.
applications pending that are being reviewed at this
How
time.
many?
3.
3. Well, that's not gonna probably spend 250.
It starts to get up there.
Okay.
I have a question. The public services component, not all the grant recipients are East Lansing organizations. Do we have guidelines or a formula, or do we require data on making sure that East Lansing residents are served?
Yes, yeah, that is required by HUD. So it varies based on from grantee to grantee. But for the overwhelming majority of those grantees, they are qualified under the limited clientele LMI benefit activity or national objective, which would mean that essentially we are individually income qualifying each individual served and also ensuring that they are an East Lansing resident. So, for example, when End Violent Encounters, which is a Lansing-based organization, they receive funds to serve East Lansing residents because East Lansing residents are served by that Lansing-based shelter.
And so they're required to collect that information and then turn it over to us?
Yes, and we're not able to process or receive money from the federal government unless we're able to report, it's called accomplishment data, the data on income and demographics
Right.
of the individual served.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Is that information shared with council members at some point?
The accomplishment data?
Yes.
It would be shared in the Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report, which is published yearly, our CAPER. Kind of is a year in review, and it's we do a public hearing on it each September.
Okay.
I have some questions. So maybe I'm just dense. So you have 2 columns on this thing. The first column to the left is CD advisory budget recommendation. What is the CD advisory budget recommendation? Where did that come from?
It came from the Community Development Advisory Committee.
Okay, so those are their suggestions, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then you have your requested budget. Where did that come from?
That was when they applied for the funding, they requested that dollar amount.
Okay, so and this may go back to some of the other questions, so the second column is what we're wishing and hoping for?
The second column was what each individual applicant requested on their initial application
From us or from the feds?
from the CD Advisory Committee.
Okay.
Yep, so from
All right,
us.
so the actual budget we're looking at that would be incorporated in our fiscal budget would be the first column, $462,405, correct?
Yes, we just gave you that information to give you a sense for how much they requested compared to recommended from the CD Advisory.
I understand, and so, Spartan Housing Cooperative,
Yes.
is that the MSU Housing Cooperative?
Yes. Well,
Which
I'm
was
not sure if
formed,
they're affiliated.
which was formed in the late 40s?
Unsure on that.
Have we ever given them money before, do you know?
I believe we have at some point, but not in any time in the past couple of decades.
Okay, and so we'd be giving that nonprofit entity money for rental rehabilitation. What is that, rental rehabilitation?
You would be taking a rental unit that is occupied by at least 51% low to moderate income qualified individuals, and you would be investing in rehabilitation of that property for anything from code compliance, hazards, lead abatement, asbestos, things like that.
Well, aren't all those cooperatives required to take MSU students only?
No.
Okay, so who else is living in those cooperatives at this point?
Anybody can live in the cooperatives.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I just want to add, I know the representative on the committee from the USC really appreciated the process, and I think it's a wonderful community engagement to help inform how these dollars are spent. So congratulations to you and helping shepherd the process and then coming forth to describe some of the programs that are being recommended.
Thank you, and thank you again to the committee members because they really did do some great work this year.
Any other questions for Matt?
so.
Okay, so then we'll move
Thank
on
you.
to the 2025 Parking Division budget, and Caleb and Jennifer joining you.
I think I got this up here.
All right.
Good evening, Council. Caleb Shiro, Downtown East Lansing Parking Administrator. All right, just going to give you a few highlights about our fiscal year 25 parking budget. It's proposed as balanced at a little over $5.8 million. What we're planning to include with fiscal year 25 is the 15-minute grace period in the gated parking facilities, continuing the 50% validation program for downtown East Lansing, or for East Lansing businesses, continuing the 50% discount multi-use vouchers, which can be purchased by anybody at a 50% discount. Also continuing the discounted monthly parking permit program, which is approximately a 65% discount off the daily max rate. Continuing contribution to homeless outreach funding through Advent House. Also, our contribution to the Downtown Management Board to market the downtown. Also, a contribution to the Parking Reserve Fund. Our parking master plan recommends contributing 12 to 15% of revenues to our reserve fund. And we only have one fee, recommended fee adjustment for fiscal year 25, and that's just adding a $2 replacement charge for paper permit hang tags. And I open up to questions.
Go ahead.
The homeless outreach funding, could you say a little bit more about why we're doing that? And do we know that it's working?
Yeah, so we have, when I took over in 2015, obviously, I noticed there was a homeless issue in the parking facilities, some using it as the parking garages as a home. Obviously, I wanted to be part of a solution to, or we wanted to be part of a solution to that issue, in not just finding housing for folks, but also not having folks sleeping in parking garages because customers need to use those stairwells. So when Tim Dempsey at the time was our Director of Planning, Building, and Development, he worked with Advent House and developed a partnership where the parking fund funds $12,000 a year and the general fund does $10,000. 8. Okay, so it's 20 total, so 12 for parking and 8 for the general fund. So we do get reports quarterly from Advent House about any contacts they've made. I carry business cards in my pocket for PATH, as do my staff. We try to have interactions with folks and develop relationships, because it doesn't just take one interaction for someone to magically want help. Everybody's got a different story. So we try to work with homeless individuals to find them help, to get them housing that can be available. So, yeah, it continues to be an issue. There's no magic answer. I'd like to say there's a magic difference, but there is, we do find people housing. Advent House finds people housing. It's small successes, in all honesty. But being part of the solution is better than just ignoring it. So that's where I'm at.
Other questions?
I have
Go ahead, Mark.
a couple of questions. I think back in the 2015-2019 era, we provided you with authority to adjust parking rates by lot to deal with any shortfall that might be in those lots. And according to the information that was provided to me this year, we lost about $414,000 in the city center Charles Street lot, lost about $142,000 in the Division Street garage, and lost $256,000 or $257,000 in the Mack Avenue garage. Have we adjusted the rates in those areas in order to encourage more parking within those locations?
Yeah, so permit rates have been adjusted, and you can see on our fee schedule matrix that we have made adjustments there, and the parking master plan that we just completed does recommend some hourly fee adjustments to our busier facilities and street parking.
Would that
but
be
then-
part of our fee schedule that we would approve this time?
That's not going to be, and I can tell you why. We plan to do that analysis for the next budget cycle, because we had a changeover of 2/3 of our management staff in the parking department. So we're getting people, new folks and new roles, and we need time to analyze what those impacts will be. But the parking master plan does recommend analyzing rate adjustments, increasing hourly rates for busier facilities, for example, like Grove and Albert, and then lowering like MAC and Division, those kind of adjustments. But we need time to analyze those.
And what about the discounts that are being provided at those locations? For instance, at the Marriott, we provide a discount, I assume, to encourage parking in there. And is that discount something that the council has approved to be awarded in that area?
So Marriott is a unique one. So we're in a condo association for University Place the condominium there. So
Right.
that's the big complex. It's the business tower and the hotel, and we're 1/3 because of the Marriott parking garage, the MAC garage. There is a parking agreement that is set to expire soon. I believe there were 4 10-year renewal terms. There's some land issue in there that I'm not too knowledgeable on, but the parking aspect is basically the Marriott pays us $1 per room rented per night, but yet are charging the customers in the teens for that parking per night. So the parking agreement is not in the city's favor in order to make that a money-making facility, but there's also debt service on the 2016 MAC rehab project that we carry. There is some tax capture that we do get back from the DDA to help take the edge off of that, the MAC rehab debt obligation. But yeah, as a whole, we do have a few facilities that aren't money makers and mostly related to either a parking agreement or debt obligation for that particular facility.
And that parking agreement was that 40-year deal that we provided.
Yeah, and there's
Got it.
there's a little question right now about, we have a condo association meeting actually on Friday, regarding whether that 4 decades, the 4 10-year renewals started at the occupancy, certificate of occupancy of the hotel or opening of the garage. And figuring out what that actually is going to be important. So we plan to discuss that at our meeting on Friday.
Well, you're going to confer with the city attorney before you have that discussion, correct? And the city manager?
Yeah,
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
yes, thank you.
Can you tell us, I'm going to ask you to dive into these numbers a little more, so you may not be prepared tonight, but
Okay.
Can you tell us the gross amount we get from the Marriott Hotel on parking in a year?
So these are going to be a little bit rough, but so 12 months MAC garage revenue is $255,000 approximately. Like I had mentioned before, we do get a debt capture back from the Downtown Development Authority. That's about $136,000.
Yeah, I'm not asking you that. I'm just
Okay.
asking on the raw dollars from the
Just
hotel.
just the charges for services, $255,000
Okay,
for last
and,
fiscal year.
As an example, if somebody buys a permit in the lot behind People's Church, which I think is number 7 or 8?
8,
Yeah, what's the monthly charge for that?
90 or 95. 95.
And down on Valley Court, can people get monthly permits down there still?
Yes, at the west end of Valley Court.
And what's the charge there?
I believe it's the same, 95.
Okay, and how much is the Marriott, or excuse me, how much is the Graduate, which I guess now is maybe owned by Marriott, but how much gross do we get from the Graduate Hotel annually in parking?
For validations or for permits or both?
Each.
Okay, I'd have to pull those numbers, so I'd have to get back to you with that
Do you have
information.
any idea?
No, I mean, tens of thousands of dollars, I mean, a large number.
Okay,
So I couldn't,
And so
I couldn't even guess
I-
that though.
so are they paying us per night?
Yeah, so we have a parking agreement with the Graduate, that they get 30 spaces. They lease from us 30 spaces at full rate at City Hall West Lot, 10 spaces at Albert Lot 8, which is the one you were talking about by People's Church. And then the remainder of their vehicles are supposed to park in the gated lot parking system and take advantage of the validation program at a 50% discount, like other East Lansing
Okay, so
businesses.
the 10 in Albert are at the rack rate?
Yes.
The full rate?
Yep, it's
Okay.
whatever market rate is at that time is how the agreement is written.
So how is it that they end up parking on Valley Court on farmers market days?
Yep, we're working with them on that, but it's technically free parking on Sundays along Valley Court.
But they're
For
under
parking in
some,
the system.
they're under some written arrangement where they're supposed to be parking what I'm going to call extra cars in our gated lots, correct?
Yep.
All right, which means in effect that when they're parking down in Valley Court, they're not observing the agreement to park in the gated lots, correct?
Don't know exactly if it's spelled out in firm terms like that.
Okay.
But next time it needs to be renewed, I'm sure that will be looked at.
Okay. And as far as you know, have they ever adopted any kind of system to have parking someplace else at a distance from the hotel and transport their guests to and from that distant location?
We actually just talked about, we had a meeting with them, city staff met with the new manager at the Graduate and their valet manager last week, I believe it was Thursday, and that was part of the discussion, figuring out some sort of shuttle service. The new manager there, Lee, is 2 months in maybe. He had requested some time to get, wrap his head around everything. The city had also sent, city staff had also sent a letter outlining some of the valet stand issues, parking location issues, and he seems very willing to work with us. So
Okay.
we're looking to ways to figure out solutions. One in particular is the valet stand out front. I know there's a bit of a parking issue along the street. They're going to be bringing back several recommendations to for the Transportation Commission to consider.
Okay, well, maybe Mark or Eric recall this, but My recollection was that the marketing for that hotel was representing that they were going to have what I'm going to call off-site parking and have a shuttle service back and forth. So maybe you could go back historically and take a look at that. Does that refresh your recollection
It
at all?
doesn't refresh my recollection, but, I think that conversation took place. I'm not sure what we ultimately decided on it.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure the council really ever in the end decided, but my understanding is that's their national model, which my recollection was that was the representation made at the city of East Lansing.
Okay.
And of course, the most parallel situation when you get into discussions with them is Ann Arbor,
Yep.
where they took over an older hotel with minimal parking behind, and I assume are somehow either using the city system down there or somehow transporting people. So there are other examples for that hotel. So, thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions?
I'm just going to add that similar line, I'm curious, which may be handled in your new master parking plan, but if the discounted monthly parking permits and the 50% discount multi-user vouchers are in line with similar communities, so, but I can hold until the master plan is produced or presented.
We can look into that.
Thanks for all your work, Caleb. I realize it's not an easy job, so thanks for coming tonight. Any
Thank
other
you,
questions?
appreciate it.
Okay, Mr. City Manager, it appears that we've gone expeditiously. I'm just curious, do you have 2 or 3 other volunteer staff members who'd like to present tonight before we have to take a break?
I don't see anybody jumping up.
Just saying,
Yeah.
just saying. Anything you'd like to elucidate on tonight before we break?
No, I'm good at this point.
Okay, and so next week, we're going to have another hour of presentation on this, just like tonight?
I think you might have a little bit longer. You have police department, you have Department of Public Works, so all things Scott, and then Parks and Rec, and then Capital Improvement Plan.
Okay, just curious, that's all.
Mayor, may I take a liberty before you close this out?
Absolutely.
I do want to recognize our library director, because we've talked about him, but Kevin King, who is newish now to the community a month in, but I wanted to say hello since it's the first time I've seen you in the chambers.
Stand up,
here.
Mr. King, will you please, so we can all see you? Thank you. Thanks for coming to East Lansing. Okay, do we have a motion? Mr. Bellman, you wanted to do something here?
I see the judge and Nicole Evans here, so I didn't know if you guys wanted.
I'm never going to call on the judge or Ms. Evans when they're not attuned ahead of time or anything else, so please do not put me in that position. It ain't going to happen. Unless you want to.
We are here and willing to answer any questions, whatever council needs.
And obviate the need for you to come next week?
Well, there is that. It's baseball season in my house. So.
Yeah, please, join us.
While they're approaching the table, I did send an email out that Nicole notified us of the ability for charges and fees or fines that the court, that statute, I believe, is scheduled to expire on May 1st. And so there is legislation that may be floating around, whether it gets approved prior to that expiration or not is the question at hand. So I turn it over.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Mayor.
It's a risky thing for me to do. I realize that.
Not at all. No one's been sworn here, and we're all good.
That's for sure.
I want to say thank you to the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem and council and Mr. Bellman for allowing Ms. Evans and I to answer any questions, address you tonight. I'll just give a very brief statement about 54B. I think Nicole and I would both say that we are very proud of how things are going at 54B at this time. It's been a period of transition. Probably the most obvious transition was the retirement of Judge Richard Ball after 30 years of serving this community. We now have 2 relatively new judges. Judge Babcock and I are working very well together and are enthusiastically doing the work of the court. We've also had a number of new staff members, welcoming them to the court over the last year and a half. And so we've been particularly Nicole, has just been working really diligently on training, professional development. We have further retirements that we are anticipating in the next 2 years. So there's, more institutional knowledge that we are trying to take advantage of to the best of our ability now, and planning for the future. So I just would like to take this opportunity to thank Nicole Evans, who has been just a tireless public servant throughout her career, but really over, the last 2 years or so, and certainly my time with the court. So she is an incredible asset for this city and for the court. And the city manager did mention an issue that perhaps council has questions about. It involves the authority for the court to impose court costs in criminal matters, and that statute is set to expire May 1st. So Nicole and I are prepared to answer any questions about that. I'm unsure about how much council knows about that or the history of that statute.
Well, I think we've had some interplay and emails back and forth. I think maybe you got one of those emails. So I think the question that some of the council members had is if in fact that statute is somehow extinct, do we have any ability to recapture any kind of expenses for our independent contractors or police, et cetera, as a result of the sentencing process?
So the statute at issue, which is set to expire May 1st, gives the court authority to assess court costs in criminal matters. So the court needs statutory authority to impose any cost. There is a separate statutory authority to impose the cost of prosecution in cases, as you know, like operating while intoxicated cases. And there's
I don't know why you'd think, Judge, that I would know that, but okay.
in your personal, professional experience, not personal experience. So we are able to, or we would be able to assess court costs of prosecution for those cases. This also does not touch civil infractions because there's separate statutory authority for us to impose costs for civil infractions. It doesn't touch parking. And the general history, this has been an issue that's been pending before the legislature for a decade. And that's no exaggeration. It has been a decade now. And so there's been several times where there's either the statute has threatened to sunset or has sunset. And the last time it did in 2022, it was a matter of days before the legislature did act and did fix it. So with that background, we would anticipate that it wouldn't be a long period of time where the legislature would not act and not give courts across the state the authority to impose costs.
Okay. Any other questions you can think of? I would just ask that, so we don't use up Ms. Evans and the judge's time, if we can direct written questions to the court in terms of any other issues like revenue and income and things like that. And expenses and stuff, but we appreciate it, so.
That would be just
Does
fine.
that satisfy everybody for tonight? Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thanks for
Sure,
being
absolutely.
So,
Nicole,
here. Go
Mayor,
ahead, I'm
actually-
sorry. Nicole.
It's okay. I wanted to be able to take advantage of my time here at the table. It's not very often I get to do that. So if I may take
Please.
a point of personal privilege to introduce myself to Mayor Pro Tem. I am Nicole Evans, the court administrator, and by delegation under the Chief Judge rule, I am responsible for pretty much all operations of the court except for ruling on the case, but we'll see what kind of statute will allow me to do that. So the statement that I just wanted to make, the city manager had asked about, what the impact of the sunset provision would be on our court, and I wanted to just point out that it is less than, let's say, 23% of our total. We've estimated, in fact, I ran a report from July for this fiscal year, and we've imposed $33,829 and we collected $31,952. So our collection rate on court costs under the 7691K1BIII statute is it's close to 95%. And then the rest of the court cost comes from the parking and the other civil infractions. And so as far as we're looking at, I believe, broken down over the last 9 months, we've collected about $3,500. And so $3,500 per month beginning May 1st until the bill or the sunset is resolved.
Okay, thank you for that. I should know we're pretty lucky because Ms. Evans also has a law degree too, so it's like it's like we have a third judge sitting over there, so.
Very true.
Can you tell us this, though? What kind of progress have you made in terms of what I'll call aged accounts receivable on these kinds of collections? Is there still a fairly significant backlog in terms of those aged costs?
Of the older cases?
Yes, yes.
Yes. We're still collecting, and so but our collection rates are high. Again, we're over 90% for most of it, and I think we're on track to, as far as our ordinance fines and costs, we're on track to meet the goal. We are falling behind. We are falling behind on court costs this year, and that's because of the changes in the legislation that has taken away the ability to assess court costs, and then just filings. You can't assess what isn't there. We can't assess cost or fines even on what's not there. As far as court costs, to date, we've collected about 70%. And of the 150, so we collected about 100,000, and we're estimating about another 11,000 per month, so another 33,000. So we're just going to fall just shy of the estimate for this year. For fiscal year 25, the estimate came in lower, and that's just based on trends. Based on at the time that we make our estimates, we use the best information that's available, and what I use is typically what we've collected, what we've been collecting. But to our credit, we've recently hired someone new who is focused on collections, and she has been doing a phenomenal job, just kind of took the reins. And so I expect that, my hope is that maybe we'll actually meet that goal with regards to the court costs.
Thank you. I have two other questions. So are you fully staffed now, Judge?
No. I'm sorry, Your
No,
Honor.
well, you can take it.
Third
I-
year.
We are not.
I know you had
Yeah,
a few
yeah, yeah,
resignations
yeah.
last year. You filled those spots?
Yes, yes. We are, right now, we have 2 openings for deputy clerks.
Correct.
Deputy clerks, which is, the entry-level position in our clerk's office.
And then just as an educational thing, and this is partly directed at the law enforcement people who are here, have you had any incidents like have been happening down in Livingston County in the district court and circuit courts down there in terms of scam phone calls to people claiming that they owe money because they didn't appear for something, or that a judge held them in contempt or anything like that? Is that,
Not for us, we haven't. heard
Deputy
anything
Chief
about
Pride says you've had that issue?
We have had that issue, and actually a friend of mine contacted me because the person said it was myself that called them.
Could you, yeah, why,
Okay.
just so the public knows, because,
So, yes, we have had scams that have come into the police department, and people that, from the community that have contacted us about scams, people saying that they have a warrant for their arrest and they have to turn themselves in unless, if they don't, a police officer will show up at their door. A lot of times it's in reference to Visa gift cards, Apple gift cards, those types of things. And like I just previously said, a friend of mine actually contacted me and told me that he had received a phone call from, at the time, Captain Chad Pride, that he was to turn himself in on a warrant in reference to a ticket that he didn't pay for. So
yeah,
once he told him that he knew me, that person then hung up.
it's very sophisticated, and I just had a client that got a call supposedly out of Livingston County, and they gave the correct callback numbers, which was the scary part about it, and gave a number of somebody retired. And then I heard, when I finally called down, and the prosecutor here helped with this, but when I finally called down there, I was told a story by the deputy down there that somebody had just been taken for $25,000. So the lesson here is, you will never receive.
We will never call you on the phone and ask for Visa gift cards or iTunes gift cards. We will never ask for money over the phone, and we will never contact you over the phone to let you know you have a warrant for your arrest.
And the same would be true of the court?
Correct.
Absolutely.
No, we cash, money order, check, Never, we tried to expand the possibilities for payment, but we're not there yet.
Well, but the point is, nobody's going to be calling anybody and saying, this is so-and-so from the 54B District Court, and we're going to be at your door to arrest you
No.
because you haven't paid this, that, or the other thing.
Outside the scope of our authority.
Say that again?
It's outside the scope of our authority, so no.
Yes, okay, all right. Sorry to use up time, but I wanted to get that out there. Any other questions?
We did use up some time, didn't we? So,
Yeah.
I do have a couple of questions.
Sure, go ahead.
One, I'll just note that I got a call from the Grand Rapids office of the FBI to let me know that, there was an arrest warrant out for me.
What did
I
they
think it
want
had been
from
out
you?
since 1968, but I'm not sure.
Did they want an Apple card from you, or what?
I didn't go into any detail once I got the message, so. Did I get this right, that you're at 70% collected at this point in time on court costs?
On court costs,
But
correct.
what would you say your annual collection rate is? Because this has been a long time issue.
Yeah, I'm estimating here, but our collections have always been high, over 80%.
Okay. Well, that actually is pretty good, I think.
Yes.
Particularly compared to some of the other courts that I've come in contact with. Did the legislature, in their wisdom, talk about what would happen if this was not renewed? Because in every district court budget, not just the district court, but in every court budget, there would be a shortfall immediately. And did they mention where that's supposed to come from?
No. I mean, the history of this is there was a Michigan Supreme Court case in 2014 that said the statute that courts had always been relying on to impose court costs did not give them that authority. So then they amended the statute we're talking about, MCL 769.1K, to provide the courts that authority, but they've always put a sunset on it, because I think this is a larger discussion that there's been consideration of different modes of court funding. So that could be part of this discussion. So the legislature has in 2014, and they put a time limit on it, and then they did it again in 17, and they did it again in 2020 and 2022, and then that was the last time where they said by May 1st of 2024 it needs to be fixed, and they just have never come up with the big fix.
And the real fix is to get rid of the sunset so that
That
we
would
can
be
all
one fix.
rely on this.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And then just a question on court security, because that was an issue,
Good
4 years
question.
ago,
Yeah.
and we talked about it at that point in time. We really don't have any court security, other than the police department, of course, being in the same building. And is that still something that the court would like us to take a look at?
Is, and I thank you very much for bringing that up. I will say, and perhaps when police discuss this, we have, under the city manager's direction, formed a broader citywide security committee. And that committee is working, and we've met several times to really address this problem. And you are right that, and I think it's good for us to just say this, because I think a lot of people in our community don't know this or understand it, that we do not have security in the way that most people would think a court would have security. We have multiple entrances, which is very unusual for a court building, and at those entrances there's no metal detectors, there's no hired security at that entrance, so it's just, absolutely free. Now we have 2 wonderful court officers who are there to help, administer the court and help people get where they need to be, but that's not the type of security that at this point, unfortunately, of where we are in our community, and I think we've all learned that, is necessary. So yes, that is an issue. It's something that Nicole and I have made a priority, and on behalf of our staff, it's something I would really like to be able to deliver on.
Right, and then in terms of that, is there, in your opinion, a physical limitation on the space that we have allocated to 54B that makes this a more difficult issue for us to deal with. I know you mentioned the entrances,
Yes.
the hallways, the 2 staircases, all of the things that would make it difficult for us to actually limit or inspect bags and other things as they come through the doorways. Has there been any discussion about relocation of any kind within the community?
Not that I'm aware of. I can tell you that there have been security studies, and I think that an objective person, an expert, would note the complications or the issues that you've noted. I think it can be done, and at least in working on the security committee, that's how we have been proceeding, is we're here, and as far as I know, this is where we are, and how to proceed with this space, and it can be done.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Eric?
Yeah, just to follow up on that. So, security could end up costing money, and we're in the context of budget discussions. Have you sort of any ballpark estimates about what this might end up adding to our expenditures in the coming year?
I do not have those figures, and I don't think Nicole would either. It is a broader citywide committee, so I would think, I don't want to push this on Captain Pride, but that this police would have a better sense of numbers, or perhaps the city manager. I don't know if you've seen numbers yet.
Actually, if you don't mind, I'd invite Deputy Chief Jennifer Brown up. She's kind of overseeing, I think it's Lieutenant Adam Parks that has been assigned to facilitate this broader discussion, not only looking at City Hall, but other city facilities, so she could probably update you on that progress.
Your Honor, she's been spot on with what she has mentioned thus far. We continue to meet on a monthly basis. The next step in the process is to start to vet vendors that would be able to provide proximity access readers to the exterior doors, as well as a weapon detection system. We are currently looking primarily at the system that Michigan State University has in place for their event locations, including Wharton Center, Breslin, et cetera. We will be bringing one of their systems over, likely the first week of May, and we'll extend the invitation out to you guys so that you can test the system alongside of us. And then once we determine it is feasible for our needs at City Hall, we will then get pricing and provide that information.
Would that be at every entrance to City Hall?
No, to Judge's point, we will secure the building by locking down all of the locations except for one. The public will have the ability to enter into one location, and through that one location, they will be greeted with a security person and the weapons detection system.
Anything else for tonight?
Just to respond to that, I think one of the hallmarks of East Lansing is easy public access to City Hall. So the entrance that's closest to the parking lot, I could see remaining without any restriction on individuals entering. Are you talking about closing off the hallways and having the entrance only at the front of the building into the area that would take you up to the courts?
My understanding, the door on the southwest corner of the building is handicap accessible, and so that is the door that we would have to make accessible to the public. So that is the door that they would enter and be greeted by that detection system,
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
which isn't most convenient in terms of parking.
Anything else?
Yeah, one quick last thing. I just wanted to go back to what Ms. Evans mentioned on the court costs and the larger state legislative challenges. $3,500 a month, it sounds like, recognizing the legislature usually adjourns they adjourn at July 4th, so you got 2 months. Fingers crossed that the sunset gets handled, or then a lot of times they don't have any real tangible session days in the fall of an election year until lame duck. So I'm just, for planning purposes, I'm just thinking about the gap in collection timeframe that may exist.
I appreciate that. If we follow the pattern of past, hoping
Yeah.
it will be more days, weeks, and not months.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Are we done? Do we have a motion?
To adjourn the special budget meeting?
Yes, sir.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much for your ad lib, ad hoc presentation tonight.